Who dat to you, Saints fans? Welcome in, and we've got another episode of There They Go Again. It's that New Orleans Saints team heading directly for the number one pick in the NFL draft. Let me tell you one thing. If you come here, you are a masochist. You are a lover of New Orleans Saints football. Don't let anybody ever tell you that you're not. Welcome in. We're going to talk about today's game. It was Tyler Shough's first start. There were some good things we saw, obviously some negatives we saw, including that interception to wrap us up towards the very end. Now, at the same time, just like we did with Spencer Rattler, we're not going to judge someone's, interception at the end of the game when you're trying to press for things too much, and you were clearly going against a much better football team. If anything, the deeper this season goes, we see more and more that the New Orleans Saints are simply not a good football team, right? They started off with a punt, then they went with another punt, and then to cap it off with another punt because what makes things better? Punting. Punting makes things better. On the opposite side of the field, you had the Los Angeles Rams who had not one, not two, not three, not four, but 5 drives of 10 or more plays. Very clearly, the New Orleans Saints were outclassed here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the beginning of the game. We're going to work our way through. Then eventually we'll get to comments and we'll do what we can for this one. And we'll evaluate players based on what we saw because let's be honest, at this point, all hope for anything else is over. Even the Carolina Panthers managed to upset the Green Bay Packers today in Green Bay, mind you, while the former Sean Payton, head coach of New Orleans Saints, is now somehow doing comeback victories against Houston, and they're winning football games. But that's okay. But we will start with some big questions like simple asking, how did Shough look over Rattler? I'm tired of hearing about Rattler's ball placement is not there. Shough had some pretty poorly thrown balls. I need the same energy for Shough. Well, see, that I would completely disagree with. In fact, today, if there is a positive to say about Shough, today's game showed you exactly why you moved from Rattler. Because his ball placement was significantly better than Spencer Rattler. At the same time, man, there are some plays from this game I wish Spencer Rattler had been there, particularly when it comes to pocket movement and pocket poise. But both, whoever would be a quarterback this game, would have struggled with a very poor offensive line. Let's start with how everything went in terms of starting off. You had Kamara up the gut. This actually starts where I actually have a big problem with Kellen Moore right now, who continues to try to run this offense based on his system instead of based on what would fit his team. And they continue to try to just run Alvin Kamara and power block systems up the gut. And I just feel bad for AK because AK ends up having a horrible stat line. Everybody's calling him washed. And I truly do believe that AK could still be a viable player in today's game, even though I do think that he has aged past his prime. That's fine. As we've talked about ad nauseum at this point, when it comes to the New Orleans Saints, you need to take your veteran players, use them more sparingly like you did during their rookie seasons. He needs to be spending more time in the slot, maybe split out wide, and then running outside zone only plays. Instead, there was a lot of predictability in this game, and we saw that even with Taysom Hill. You had that one pop-off with QB power that comes in the second half, which was a great play call, but then they kind of scaled it back a little bit and did the predictable thing, and they ran it multiple times and resulted in getting stopped. Not having Kendre Miller here might be a bit of a loss, but we'll continue on. Second drive was another punt, which went for -6 yards, followed by the third drive, again, another punt. You had a combined 13 yards through your first 3 drives. Now, a lot of this was also on the offensive line. So, for example, you look over on the other side, you had Fisk, who only got 1 sack, but if you talk about QB hits, you had multiple. And there was also a lot of pressure from that LA front. And easy to recognize that the New Orleans Saints offensive line is struggling right now. Cesar Ruiz goes down with a bit of another injury. You had some poor play where you also had Fuaga on the right side go down and having to have a backup come in for him. So the offensive line has been beleaguered, not to mention starting with a new center. Things did not get better in that regard, but I guess if you have to pick some positives on the opposite side in the first half, you did have Chase Young picking up him a sack. He's certainly at least being one of the few who is paying off, as it were. Offensively, second half did not show as much as you would hope, but in terms of scoring, you did actually have a scoring drive that you could take advantage of. You have a field goal in the second quarter, and then you had a 11-yard touchdown pass to Juwan Johnson. Very well-placed ball. Nice design. Would have loved to have seen that more in the second half. Coming into that second half, you definitely had you felt like there was a chance. I really didn't feel like you'd win this game, but 20-10, then you get blanked in the second half. Offensively, like we said, Alvin Kamara finishes the day with 17 total yards on 9 touches. That's less than 2 yards a touch. Not good. Shough ends his day 62.5% with 176 through the air, took a sack, threw 1 TD, and threw that interception on the final drive of the Saints game as they were trying to push for something going forward on 4th down. He makes a throw, and it ends up getting picked off. But his first start, I think it's always good to judge players based on their first start. And we did the same thing with Spencer Rattler, right? There are some things that you're just not going to see. Spencer Rattler's first start, he had 2 interceptions. Spencer Rattler's first start, he had a 60 QB rating. Now, that isn't to say that Rattler is better than Shough, nor the other way around. I think that what you see is this team is growing, and this team is young, and this team has got problems all across the football field. But a couple of chats we want to jump into here. Simple Cash says, so how was the call plays that went on 3rd down to AK's feet? Wherever his ball placement has issues as well, his pocket awareness was terrible. I think people are picking individual elements out. So, for example, multiple sideline throws to Rashid Shaheed, perfect on the money. Perfect on the throw to Chris Olave. Perfect to Juwan Johnson multiple times. And when we say perfect, we're talking about the ability to run after the catch, to be able to move with the ball. You saw intermediate and deep passes, Rashid 26, Olave 27. Those were extremely well-placed balls. And to say that those aren't better than Spencer Rattler is to be just disingenuous. Now, to your second point, this is where Spencer Rattler had the leg up and arguably, and remember, last week I said he shouldn't have been benched. He would have performed better here. His pocket awareness and pocket presence, Spencer Rattler absolutely has an advantage of that versus Tyler Shough. On the flip side of that, Spencer Rattler has started almost a full season of NFL football, and Tyler Shough is not. And there are just things that will only come to pass with time. With it clear that the 1-7 New Orleans Saints are done, as in they're not pushing for the division, nor are they pushing for a playoff spot, you're not in the evaluation mode where whether it was Rattler, whether it was Shough, you're simply, or in this case, Kellen Moore, you're evaluating what you see on the field for what you can get to. And you're absolutely correct. Tyler Shough's pocket awareness and pocket poise is not as good as Spencer Rattler, and that's something that he will have to improve on. But in terms of ball placement, we can go pound for pound, play for play. Ball placement significantly better in this game, and the wide receiver room certainly showed that. We'll see if that continues, though, because Shough is far from a perfect quarterback and has a lot of flaws that he has to improve on. Fish says, what do you guys say now? He got his start and same results. I would say the same thing that I've said. If you expected Shough to come in and lead this team and win football games just because he was secretly going to be the sauce that needed to be added to the pot, I think that you were setting yourself up for disappointment. I mean, I saw from Tyler Shough what I thought I would see from Tyler Shough. He's a second-round quarterback who needed development, who isn't ready on a bad football team. I had no anticipation that going against the LA Rams in LA that he was going to look good. And I want to add that my argument has always been, if you were going to start Tyler Shough, I always said it needed to happen at the bye week. Other people have disagreed, which is completely fine. But you've now given him the Rams. You're going to have to go play in Carolina. I thought that they should give him the bye week, start with the starters there and move on. We'll see how he looks. His first start was mid, right? And you can see that from the stats. Wasn't good, wasn't great, wasn't bad. You know, we threw an 81.2 QB rating with an interception at the very end. But for the most part, he had well-placed balls, definitely had some pressure issues. Clearly that got to him as well. And this was not a good game for anybody on the offensive side of the ball. And, you know, certainly not banking on this being the long-term option yet. Lots of growth to go. True says, do you think or have you heard that we'll be trading anyone by the trade deadline? I can tell you this. I still have a couple of people. There's one coach that I still talk to on the New Orleans Saints, and there's also a couple people in the front office. Chris Olave calls and Rashid Shaheed calls have absolutely happened. Whether anybody will move on them, I don't know. Chris Olave finishes today 3 of 4 targets, 57 yards. But one thing about Olave and Shaheed that you like to see is they're both back to their normal, what you would usually see them receiving at. They're not receiving at, 7 yards a game. What I mean by that is you're seeing them have more success in the deeper intermediate routes, even in limited touches. So just for reference, Chris Olave coming into this game, it's really low, y'all. Was averaging 9.7 yards a reception, right? That is career low. He's not that guy. Even when Derek Carr was here, Chris Olave was averaging 14 to 13 yards a reception. So it's good to see these guys show that they can perform a little bit deeper, but at the same time, again, there was no way that Shough was going to come in and turn this team around. And I think anybody that had that belief, well, you believe way too much in Tyler Shough. Now, I'm not trying to be mean with that, but this is a football team that has got to get better. And it's not one, you could have a superstar quarterback right now. It's not going to work. It's just not. Raheem, good to see, says, feels like this offense does way too much pistol and shotgun, that the run game is predictable, that Kellen Moore tries to be too cute at times. And I agree. That was a problem with Spencer Rattler, right? Spencer Rattler is a guy who's very comfortable under the center, very comfortable with play action. They very rarely gave him that. And this kind of goes back to what I've been saying all year. It feels like Kellen Moore is installing his system, and he's just evaluating out who is going to be my future, who's going to fit in my system, regardless of whether it's to the strength of the players. He's playing to the strength of his system and evaluating based on that. Is that the right or wrong way to do it? I mean, I'm not an NFL head coach. Is it the way I would do it? No. My personal belief is that you go out with every game trying to win the game. And I'm not saying Kellen Moore's not trying to do that, but use Spencer Rattler as an example. All season long, I said, hey, Spencer Rattler plays really well in terms of play action. Hey, Spencer Rattler plays better under center. Hey, Spencer Rattler plays better with option plays. And you just didn't see them use that a lot. Just like I've talked about, Alvin Kamara is better when he's used exclusively in outside zone running. A few games ago, you saw that, and Alvin Kamara had a fantastic game. Then you went back to manpower systems. And a lot of that is going to be on the coaching staff and Kellen Moore, which is part of why Shough could not come in and just make things better. Right? Just couldn't. Simply says we need to stop saying rookie quarterback. He's 26. I know it was his second year, but how did Tom look in his first start? I'm not sure. Tom who? How Pat look in his first start? First off, he is a rookie. I don't know why anybody would say just because he's 26, it's not a rookie. You could be 37 and you're a rookie. NFL snaps you cannot replicate that. You could spend 10 years in college football. You're still a rookie when it comes to NFL speed. And that's just the truth of it. The worst NFL team to ever exist is better than the best college football team to exist. You can find your favorite. I don't care if you're a fan of the Big Ten, ACC, SEC, whatever. Take the LSU Tigers from a few years ago. Arguably the greatest collegiate team of all time. Would get dog smacked by double-digit scores to play any of the NFL teams. Any of them. Any of them. That's just the nature of it. So he's a rookie. He's going to have to grow. Some people have an issue with his age. Truth is, NFL teams don't, right? And with the average age of a quarterback in terms of retirement being 34, 35 years old, means if Shough can develop into something that's 2 full contracts of play, the NFL team will take that. But also at the same time, you definitely better be scouting right now, because as our friends over at Tankathon can tell you, the New Orleans Saints currently have the number 1 pick in the NFL draft. Now, with that said, I'm of the belief you trade that pick. I don't believe you should keep the number 1 pick. I believe you trade back into maybe around 5, 6, 7. I mean, any of those, the New York Giants, maybe not, but Cleveland, clearly not in love with their quarterback situation. Arizona, really in love with Murray long term? I mean, there's options. Vegas, definitely a team that could potentially trade up for whoever is deemed the best quarterback in the league. And you've got less than 2 hours until the trade deadline. We'll see what that looks like. And that, of course, is covered on Tankathon as well. Let's see where they can go. In this game, you're really looking at, and this is kind of how it's going to have to be moving forward if you're a Saints fan, you're more looking for guys. Does this player look good enough to play on this team next year? So, does this quarterback look good enough? Now, Mr. Don adds context is that Kurt Warner started late. He's a Hall of Fame quarterback. 26 isn't old for a quarterback. You can still play 10 plus years. Agreed. Look, if there are knocks to be made on Tyler Shough, and there are, it's not his age. And I think if you want to find problems with Tyler Shough, don't worry. I can help show you film where Tyler Shough struggles. Age is not a problem. That's not something to be concerned about. So it's not something to be concerned about at all. Now, as terms of where we're at, there are definitely some things to be concerned about. Defensively, very concerned when you look at this team giving up 34 points. I mean, I know it's the LA Rams, but this was the worst defensive performance of the season, in my opinion. And you can see that when you look just at who the Saints have faced and what those scores have been. You know, the New Orleans Saints have given up 34. You can argue the Seattle Seahawks game. I feel like that's a game that just got away from them. But the Rams game, I feel like, is worse because it never felt like they had control from the beginning. Again, 5 drives of 10-plus plays. They could never really force a third down. And LA clearly took their foot off the gas. They just stopped really trying to dominate. You look at the team stats. You know, LA, 50% on third down, 100% on fourth down, 80% in the red zone, 100% on goal to go. You know, we bragged about how well the defense had played against Tampa, stopping them 7 times at the 1-yard line. Jonathan Vilma calls that out in the broadcast, yet immediate touchdown here. This, to me, felt like the worst game of the defense this year. And again, because this team is what they are at 1-8, you can't be too concerned about it. I mean, okay, they've lost another football game, but this is the worst offensively. They might not have given up the most points, but man, it really looked rough to me. Now, Arjeen coming into this, he says, I agree with you. It feels like Moore cares more about establishing his scheme than running whatever it takes to win. And I will say, in Moore's defense, you know, you could come into this team, and unless you had severe black and gold colored glasses that just really skewed your belief of what this team could be, how many people really believe this team was going to be a playoff team? Now, there's always a chance. Week 1, everybody's 0-0. You've all got a shot. But 2 things happen every time as the season progresses. Teams get worse and teams get better. New Orleans is getting worse. So maybe Kellen Moore, knowing that Mickey Loomis is going to give him a bit of job security. I mean, if Moore leads this team to 1-16, he's not going anywhere. He knows he's got another year. And while I hate that as a fan, like I don't want to go pay money to see this team, I understand the logic behind it. I dislike the logic, and please nobody take this as me defending Kellen Moore, just simply explaining the logic, right? Same thing with Alvin Kamara. Kellen Moore probably knows that surely Kellen Moore knows Alvin Kamara is still good in outside zone. But at the same time, Alvin Kamara is 30 plus. If he's going to see if Alvin Kamara is going to be a feature for him in the future, got to see if he fits his system. Right? Same thing when it comes to Juwan Johnson. You know, why is Juwan Johnson still on this team, not traded? Why is he not benched, etc.? You got to see what you have. Offensively, Juwan Johnson had a solid day today, got the touchdown pass, only had 1 drop, which, hey, for him, that's a huge W. You see what you got and go from there. Joseph says, is Alvin checked out or simply not being used correctly? Joseph, I can say this. Now, I'm going to say this confidently as someone who's gotten to talk to Alvin Kamara, interview him, etc. Alvin Kamara is not the type of man nor player who's just going to phone it in and wing it out and not care. He's very passionate about the city of New Orleans. He's very much said several times he wants to retire here. I don't think he's phoning it in. I think Alvin Kamara is 30 plus. He's being used in a way that is not to his strengths. Again, I'm not trying to insult Alvin Kamara. I just think that he's past his prime. That's okay. It's not a problem to be past your prime. It's a problem if you still have talent and you're not being used correctly. And I think the best way I can describe this is look at Christian McCaffrey in San Fran. I don't believe Christian McCaffrey is just that much better in terms of longevity and durability than Alvin Kamara. I just believe he has a coach who's specifically using him in a way that is conducive to his success. Here, let me give you a visual example. This is today's carry chart for Alvin Kamara, right? Now, he did have a fumble, which is uncharacteristic of Alvin, but you had 1 run outside the tackles the entire time. That's it. 6 carries. He did have that fumble, but clearly not being used in a way that traditionally you would see him being used in a New Orleans Saints uniform and just what we've known him to be successful at, right? And again, none of this is to say that the team can't play better, but it does say one thing pretty loudly, that this New Orleans Saints team is they're playing their game, and that game is Kellen Moore's, and it just, if somebody fits that game, great. If they don't fit that game, oh well. That feels like that's where they're currently at right now. So we'll see where it ends up being. Now, Suave says, can we now start questioning the coaching of this team? Are we ready to talk about the real issue now? Well, we've been talking about that on this podcast all season long, right? Kellen Moore has got plenty of things that I question. Is he doing things the right way? And I think it's fair to do that. When it comes to Kellen Moore, you knew he's going to have a little bit of a longer leash with Mickey Loomis as the GM. And to be fair, I don't believe that any coach should be fired after one season. I don't believe that's the right way to do it anyway. Things take time to build. In fact, if you want a great example of things take time to build, go look at Bryce Young, who's not doing amazing, but his football team's 5-4. They're doing enough to win, right? You look at situations that can go negatively for a player like CJ Stroud, who did not get to complete today's game. But the point I'm making is some guys take time, right? And you have to give a coach the time to make that happen. Other times you just have coaching staffs who can't pull it off. An example I would say is Jackson Dart. Could he be the guy? I mean, Jackson Dart certainly looks like a good NFL quarterback. Not saying great, but his team's 2-7. Brian DeBola's had plenty of opportunity at this point, and it is clearly not working out. At some point, you say there are some coaches who are better than others. Shanahan's able to take guys like Mac Jones that win football games and go 6-3, while guys like, in my opinion, Jackson Dart, who's arguably more talented than Jones, well, he's stuck with DeBola and they're having no success. So a lot of it does depend on coaching. And I think that as fans, you should absolutely be calling it out if you think the New Orleans Saints are playing poorly because of coaching. Now, I've been doing that all season long. And I'm not doing that to toot my own horn. I'm just simply saying the New Orleans Saints have had a struggle with coaching and that Kellen Moore is his first time coaching, right? That isn't to make make excuses, but it is to say when you look at what this team does well and what this team does poorly, you can see there is a mold that Kellen Moore is trying to fit certain things in. I think receivers like Shough and Olave fit what Moore wants to do. And he wants to have a quarterback who's willing to do the things that he wants that quarterback to do. That's not always going to be the case, right? So for example, I'll give you a visual example, again, just using these charts from NFL Next Gen. Now, again, I believe that Spencer Rattler, I'm going to reiterate this because there's such a wide divide when it comes to Spencer Rattler and Shough. I do feel like you have to preface these things. I don't believe that Rattler should have been benched last week. I would have kept him starting until the bye week. But one thing I can tell you that he does not like about Rattler, that being Moore, is Rattler's style of play. And what I mean by that is, look at this chart. Rattler loves to live in 15 yards and under. He just does. That's not calling him a bad player. That's just his style. He loves to live in that 15 yards and under. And that's been consistent week to week. Now, let's look at this game of Tyler Shough. Tyler Shough will happily live between 15 and 25. He's going to take more of those risks. I'm not saying that makes Tyler Shough a better quarterback. I'm simply saying a lot of what you're seeing is Moore trying to push his system. There's a certain type that he wants to have. It doesn't mean that, Spencer Rattler can't be successful. But again, just to point out, here's another game for Spencer Rattler this year. This is a couple weeks ago. Not even saying he had a bad game. It's the same thing, right? Same thing. Short, to the point. It's just the style that he plays. Doesn't make Spencer Rattler a bad player. I think Spencer Rattler, with a coach who wanted to play to his strengths, could have a lot of success. Again, more of the same of Spencer Rattler. I think he could have success. It's just, will you get that with Kellen Moore? I just don't believe Kellen Moore is going to give those guys that chance. You're either going to fit Kellen Moore's system of what he's building or you're not. And I don't believe a lot of the people fit what he wants to have in New Orleans right now. So, by the way, on this show, y'all lead the show. So if you've got comments, questions, throw them in. We love to read them out. You can disagree with the podcaster. That's completely fine. I'm just a guy with a microphone. For those who don't know my background, I was trained in NFL scouting via the Scouting Academy. I've had my reports used and read via two teams, the Tennessee Titans and the New Orleans Saints, and I got to cover the team professionally for both Bleacher Report and The Athletic for several years. I'm very passionate about the New Orleans Saints, but at the same time, I don't know everything, and that's why y'all have always led this show. Woe says, great players who are past their prime are still better than most. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I would still take Alvin Kamara over Neal right now, but at the same time, neither are looking pretty and neither are being used correctly. Who Dat Forever says we have the worst front office ever assembled. Now, that I don't agree with, but says the coaching staff that is seemingly getting worse as the season goes and not a single player you can build around. We are the 2000/early 2010 Browns. I would disagree with that slightly, but I do get what you're saying. For example, one of the most important pieces a young team can have is a good left tackle. I think the New Orleans Saints arguably have a great left tackle of the future right now in Banks. Right? I was actually hesitant to draft Banks because I liked Fuaga last year. I thought Fuaga was a solid left tackle. They've drafted, if he can stay healthy, a great left tackle, making Fuaga a good right tackle. The New Orleans Saints have got two key pieces right there. You want to win football games, you build in the trenches. Now, the interior O-line, look, I love Eric McCoy. I think he's, getting long in the tooth and injured. You've got to fix that as well. But I think you got pieces there. Defensively, I think you have a couple of pieces there. But to your point, I do agree. This team needs a full rebuild, and they need to quit pretending like they don't. And that's saying directly to Mickey Loomis, who I think needed to have moved on years ago. That said, there are pieces here. I don't want to sit there and tell fans there's not a single piece to build around. There are. And I'm curious to see, as the season goes on, who else can be there, right? But another point to add to this is coaching is very important. And I talk about the importance of coaching all the time. I didn't want to get rid of Clint Kubiak as quickly as we did. I feel like that was a problem, but I understood that was going to happen with Kellen Moore coming in and becoming the head coach. Kubiak having success right now with Seattle. You look at some of the terrible teams of NFL past, a lot of it is not that they didn't have talented players in certain positions. They didn't have a talented coaching staff. And right now, I think as you look at through the rest of the year, so many people get focused on Tyler Shough or Spencer Rattler. Honestly, neither have shown you anything to believe that they're your franchise long-term. But if you're going to grade and evaluate anything as a fan, cool, pick a side. Be a Tyler Shough fan. Be a Spencer Rattler fan. But really critique the coaching staff. Is Staley a defensive guy that you can believe in? I'll be honest. There's a lot of people who have struggled to believe in Staley in the past and feel like he's a mid at best defender. Then you also look from the offensive side. Kellen Moore is unproven. Now, Philly certainly has a history of good offensive coaching here recently. Obviously, they've gone to the Super Bowl. There's talent there. But Kellen Moore does not deserve to just be given a infinite leash and told that, we're going to trust on him because he was part of Philly. If you believe, like I do, that he's having some struggles and not making great choices, that deserves to be called out. And I think it should be. Good to see Godfather says Kellen Moore was hired for his play calling. It is evident Loomis and him are false advertising and all they promise to deliver. Only incompetence defends incompetence. Well, good thing I'm not defending any incompetence because I'm openly questioning Kellen Moore. I don't think Kellen Moore has proven to be the offensive aficionado that he was said to be. I will say that he's going to have multiple years, at least 2, to see what he can do here in New Orleans. But right now, if you're a Saints fan, there's no reason to be confident in Teeth, as he gets called by some of his not-so-fans. Yeah. Now, Anthony says, how can you tell if the roster is so bad? My rebuttal to that would be, and this is just an honest question, you look around the league right now, do you believe the New Orleans Saints have the worst roster in the NFL? Do you believe the Saints have a worse roster than the Las Vegas Raiders? And if you do believe that, that's completely fine. Do you believe the Saints have a worse roster than the Cleveland Browns? I don't. I believe they're worse in their record, but I don't think the New Orleans Saints' talent is the very bottom. Now, don't get me wrong. I do believe the New Orleans Saints' talent is in the lower half of the league. Absolutely. I'm not saying that the New Orleans Saints are secretly like a superstar-studded roster and everything is the problem of Kellen Moore and whoever the quarterback is. Not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there is talent on this team. And when that talent is 1-8, as in your record is 1-8, there's reasons to look at things like the coaching staff for that. I do not believe the Saints are worse than the Tennessee Titans roster-wise. And we can check that out. If you haven't before, there's a great website called Our Lads, and you can look up all these teams. If you've never checked it out, easiest way to go check out each roster, check out places like Our Lads, and you look at who they have as starting. And when you look at the Tennessee Titans, they're a team covered in rookies. They have some veterans, but they are not a good football team. Roster to roster, the New Orleans Saints are a better roster if you go position by position. That doesn't mean the Saints are good. Saints are bad. They're 1-8. But the Saints don't have the worst roster in the league, was the point that I'm making. And because of that, you can evaluate coaching. Let me give you another example, right? Look at today's game. Saints went for it on 4th down. But how you go for it on 4th down really matters. The New Orleans Saints were 0 for 2 on 4th down today. One of those being the interception at the end of the game where they're just trying to push it. Another was maybe the most predictable 4th down call with Taysom Hill at quarterback because they have run it multiple times this season. No variation. They're pulling Trevor Penning to the right. They're trying to get Juwan Johnson to block the end man on the line of scrimmage, and it blows up in their face. It's a predictable play call. You can take that and judge the coaching staff because that was not a failure of player talent. That was a failure of play calling. Right? Now, that isn't me saying Juwan Johnson is the best tight end in the league, nor is it to say that Taysom Hill is now what he was 5 years ago. But it is to say coaching predictability is something that gets studied heavily. Bill Belichick is infamous. He would purposely skew stats for this. So you see how the New Orleans Saints went 2 for 9 on 3rd down, 22%. Well, Belichick in the heyday of the Tom Brady, Patriots, etc., he would purposely run calls that he normally would not in certain situations just to skew stats, just to skew analytics, and just to see, will that team focus on that play so that I can do the old switcheroo later on. It's something he was famous for. Keeping things unpredictable. New Orleans is very predictable in their play calling right now. And again, part of that maybe goes back to the fact that they're trying to do a Kellen Moore system. We'll see how it pans out. Godfather Good C says, we do have the worst roster than those teams. Cleveland dominates on the defensive top to bottom. Flacco at quarterback, they had a better QB. Receivers and tight ends and even running back could be argued with Judkins. And again, that's fine if we want to make the argument. I don't agree, but I hear it. You can't convince me at all the New Orleans Saints are a worse roster than the Tennessee Titans. So even if you want to argue the Browns are better, which the Browns don't have Flacco at quarterback, certainly not worse than the Tennessee Titans. But yeah, this team definitely needs help. They have talent deficiencies. You look at guys like Demario Davis being one of your better players. Well, he's at the end of his rope. I love Demario, but that's done. Cameron Jordan, clearly, that's done. I mean, you're at that stage of your career, right? Offensively, is Alvin Kamara an A-tier running back? No, he's not. And it's okay to say that. Are any of the receivers A-tier? If Chris Olave was purely a flanker, like if I traded Chris Olave to a good team that had a great X and he was the Y, I think Chris Olave is an easy 1,200-yard, 8 TD a season guy consistently. So I would put him in an A-tier receiver. We just don't have that true X, which clearly Kellen Moore wants to have as well. Yet on that note, it doesn't use Vele, who they traded for, which is where we can get back to griping at Mickey Loomis. But there you have it. Now, if you go over to various stats, you go to Pro Football Reference. One thing I want to show y'all, and again, we're talking about just being the worst roster. Coming into this game, New Orleans Saints defense was 15th in the league in yards, 27th offensively, right? So again, this is just a point that, is it the worst team in the NFL roster-wise? No, but it can still be the worst team when you combine bad coaching, up and down quarterback play, etc. And that's where New Orleans is at right now. That's where New Orleans is at. That's the team they are. Good, bad, ugly. That's where they're at. And that's why they're not winning football games. Now, I'm going to be here no matter what, and hopefully you will as well. And I appreciate y'all being here. I appreciate everybody who's willing to be a hoot at through the uglies, which, by the way, Chicago upsetting Cincy just because you brought up Joe Flacco. Do think it was worth shouting out. Joe Flacco, crazy enough. 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 470 yards. Absolutely crazy. Godfather says for the Raiders, not Geno, but Myers, Crosby, etc. Even kicker for the Raiders had the edge. Geno, when in Seattle, proved the right system. He can be top 15. Well, that's the thing. Again, the whole argument is roster, coaching. Geno's also had bad years as well. you're right. There could be good coaches who elevate people. If Sean Payton was here, Spencer Rattler and Tyler Shough would look a hell of a lot better than they do with Kellen Moore. How do I know that? Easy. Let me go pull up the game. Because 3 weeks ago, I watched it happen. I said, you might want to be careful with this, Saints fans. Saints fans were just dogging Bo Nix about how terrible he was. Yeah, well, Bo Nix is leading a 7-2 team through less than 50% completion, but still through 2 touchdowns. How many multi-touchdown games are Spencer Rattler or Tyler Shough throwing? That's the Sean Payton effect. Good enough coach to win football games with freaking Bo Nix. Now everybody's going to be like, well, Bo Nix is a first-round quarterback. Cool. Saints fans 4 weeks ago were talking about they'd rather have Spencer Rattler than Bo Nix because the analytics nerds with their CPOE and their EPAs and et cetera were like, oh, well, Spencer Rattler's actually secretly top 15. Those who study tape know that's not true. But if he had Sean Payton, could he be? Maybe. And that's where we get back to the Kellen Moore part of this conversation. Kellen Moore deserves criticism as anybody does. Criticize Tyler Shough for his interception. Good. Criticize Spencer Rattler for his turnovers. Good. Criticize Kellen Moore for bad play calling. Absolutely. That's going to be our show for the day. Appreciate you. I do plan on doing one with the trade deadline upcoming to see if the New Orleans Saints make any moves. Also want to give a shout out to the Monroe Moccasins who have started off hot in hockey. Check them out. And give a shout out to the Baton Rouge Zydeco as well. I give love to our boot teams. Godfather says Payton would have never let either of those quarterbacks touch his roster. He would rather have had Jameis here. Honestly, not going to argue that either. I wanted Jameis here. And Godfather, it's good to see you, and thank you for supporting the channel. We'll have something for y'all when it comes to the trade deadline. I'm hoping the New Orleans Saints do something to build up some capital because, again, like it or not, this team is clearly rebuilding, which means you will need draft capital and free agent acquisitions to make that happen. We'll see what that ends up looking like. Who dat? God bless. I appreciate every single one of you. Deuces, that's me. Catch you on the next one. Hit up the Discord or X if you want to chat with me more, and I'll see you then.